Morning. It is the appointed time and we have a quorum. Can we now invite the administration to come in?
有幾個局長，因為處長就有5個處長嚇，有 Director Social Welfare 4位處長。
Welcome to you, administration. Mr. Lau Kong-wah, the secretary, and 4 directors of departments. I will not introduce you one by one. Today we are on audit report number 68, chapter 2. Today Kenneth Leung will lead the hearing. Last time we were at 3.22. Yes. We will start from there today. If members have other questions, please feel free to raise them afterwards. I believe we can conclude Chapter 2 today. Chairman, this is our hope. This is our working target. I hope the target will not shift. Good morning, administration, and also members. Last time, we were at 3.22. We are near the ending paragraphs of Chapter 3. So to start the meeting, I'd like to ask questions on 3.22 and 3.23. These have to do with the PSP, public subscription permits, and the constraints of these permits. I, of course, understand that the Hong Kong ICPA has issued the Practice Note 850 for the reference of organizations. The Practice Note is not very detailed. Well, I'd like to ask this question because I myself did not read Practice Note 850. I'd like to ask whether you go for a cash-based accounting system or accrual-based accounting system. Is there a clear guideline on the system to be followed? If not, it is up to the organization to decide which accounting system to use. Is that right? Who will take the question? DSW. Chairman, after the last meeting, we had a meeting with the Hong Kong ICPA. In the practice note, it mentions that in general, the accrual-based system should be used, but there is no hard and fast rule for that to be adopted. And according to the audit department, and if there will be future donations by charitable organizations, should we require that the accrual-based system should be used? The ICPA says it is possible, but if this is adopted, the organizations may need more time to compile the accounts. And also, they may need to charge a higher fee of the organizations. And if indeed this is adopted, we may have to talk to the welfare sector again. And also, since we now require the organizations to submit an audited account within 90 days, but if it is going to take longer, we may have to talk to organizations about that. Director and Chairman, you set 90 days from the day of the event for the submission of audited accounts. Is my understanding correct? Yes. How did you come up with 90 days? Is it a consensus among you, or are there some guidelines? I heard you say, Director, that if the accrual-based accounting system is to be adopted, you said there would be 2 points to consider. One, there will be a higher accounting fee, or that is possible. And also, you may need to review the 90 days limit. My first question is, when the accountants audit the accounts of the organizations, my understanding is that mostly it is done on a pro bono basis. Is my understanding correct? Director, well, it works both ways. Sometimes a fee is charged, sometimes pro bono work is done. I remember last time I said that there were late submission, and since maybe it was done on a pro bono basis, and if the accountant is busy, then he may have to delay the work. So it works both ways. And when I said that there will be a fee charged, I did not mean that it is always the case, but it is just possible that the fee may have to be raised. And the ICPA may have to consult its members before we will have a clearer answer. And also the 90 days limit. At that time, we talked to the ICPA and also representatives of charitable organizations that we were familiar with, and that was a consensus reached among us. Because from the public's point of view, if they want to monitor how much money is donated and how it is used, the public may not want to wait too long to know it. But then from the accounting point of view, it also takes time. In the past, some people use the cash-based system because that is simpler and it is easier to see the final cash balance. But in future, we will have to discuss more before we can know the way forward. And then in 3.23, it says that 28% of accounts were prepared on a cash basis. Generally speaking, these activities may be of a simple nature and there should not be a problem. But then in case 2, I think there is indeed a problem. Page 42. If a cash-based report is adopted, some of the money might not have been included. Case 2 is a typical case, or a classic case. Can the director explain why this happened? And out of the 28%, are there similar cases that have not been reviewed or included in this report? Director, perhaps I can explain case 2 first. This is a rather special case. Altogether, there were 2 activities in this case. In the first one, 4 permits, second one, 3 permits, altogether 7 PSPs. When their accounts were submitted, there were repeated delays. We used emails, letters to remind the organization to submit the audited reports. After repeated reminders, we still could not see enough evidence for 2 sums which were said to have been used for daily expenses. And then in July 2010, we referred the case to the police for investigation, but then there was insufficient evidence, so no prosecution was taken out. At the SWD, we issued a letter of reprimand That is what the case is about. As to the cash-based or accrual-based accounting systems, at the time, the organization was not able to deposit the cash into the bank account within 90 days of the day of the event, and that flouted the condition of the permit. So we issued a reprimand. And for cash-based system, some of the money might not come back within 90 days, and so the accounts would not reflect the final income and expenditure. That is where the problem is. And then, are there similar problems with other cases within the 28%, or is it that the cash amounts were not as huge, so they were not exposed? I'd like to know whether there are similar problems with regard to the other cases within the 28%. No, Chairman. Okay, then we can continue. Let us go to 3.25, the recommendations of the audit for improvement. Chairman, I think I mentioned this last time. But I'd like to ask the administration to confirm 3.25a. The scope of the PSP has been the subject of legal advice from the DOJ. Is it that the legal advice concerned has been summarized and uploaded online? So I'd like just to clarify whether you are still doing it or whether you have done it. Director. Chairman, we have sought legal advice, but we have not implemented the proposal to name and shame. But we will have to be clear what are serious or repeated contraventions as proposed by the audit, and what kind of contraventions should be exposed. At the Lotteries Fund Advisory Committee, we will discuss this, and when we have a proposal, we'll again seek the advice of the DOJ. In this respect, I must say that the DOJ has asked us to tread with caution, because when you expose the names of organizations, the reputation of these organizations may be tarnished. Therefore, we need to look at the uniqueness of each case, say if there is late submission. But if it is just that the auditor works on a pro bono basis and the auditor is too busy to do it. So we have to look at the nature and seriousness of each case, and we'll have to look into this situation carefully. Chairman, the director said that if auditors work on a pro bono basis, they may not be too proactive in doing this because they have other clients. And if they work on a pro bono basis, they may tend to delay the work. Now, I think that is not satisfactory. Should this be the way forward, you can issue guidelines and maybe talk to the Hong Kong ICPA. And if you do auditing for this kind of events, maybe you don't work on a pro bono basis, but you can go for a cost recovery fee. Maybe there can be a fee guideline. Do you think that works? First, the organization may not have to pay a high fee. And secondly, the auditors will have certain incentive to complete the work on time. Director, have you looked into the fee charging side? Chairman, we have been discussing with the Hong Kong ICPA. We can take this view back to the Hong Kong ICPA. But you should not interfere into the service provided by charitable organizations to society. Well, Chairman, this is just my view. It is a free market, after all. For the time being, I don't have more questions on Chapter 3. I'd like to see whether other members have questions on Chapter 3. Members, would you like to raise any questions on Chapter 3? If not, Kenneth, you can lead the discussion into the next part. Certainly, we'll go into Chapter 4 now. Lottery licenses for charitable fundraising activities. I understand that the licensing authority is the HAD. Under the gambling ordinance, some lottery activities have to be licensed. My first question is, there can be different kinds of lottery activities. If a person wants to set up a street stall to sell lottery tickets to the public, he sets up a booth. Does it mean he has to get 3 licenses? First of all, the HAD license, and perhaps he has to apply for a PSP from the SWD because he is going to do it in public, and he also occupies land. So does it mean he needs to take out 3 licenses or just 1? Please, who can answer the question? HAD? Director. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. If the fundraising is done in the streets, the person just has to apply with us. And we will consult the police, the lands department, the highways department, etc. In normal circumstances, he just has to come apply for a license with us. We'll ask the police whether it will cause inconvenience to the public. After consultation, we will consider issuing the license. You mean there is one-stop service? You will coordinate with the Lands Office and the Highways Office, is that right? That's correct. Chairman, I will go to 4.4, where there is a table. The documents that are required to be submitted upon completion of a lottery event. I'm referring to Table 8 under 4.4. There are 5 types of documents that have to be submitted. I'd like to ask a question about B. You ask for a copy of the income and expenditure account and a review report. In the last part, I asked Ms. Ip, DSW, and she said she would have a format for people to follow. Then do you also have a pro forma for organizations to follow? In fact, I can ask our clerk. Last time I said that, sorry, Chairman, I have to go back to Chapter 3. Is there a form for the audit opinion to be inserted? And then at B, is there a pro forma also for the review report issued by the HAD? That is, if you ask an auditor to do audit for you, then the audit opinion may have to be inserted into a certain pro forma. Thank you.
Mr.
Secretary, do you have a template? Well, Mr. Leung was asking a question on Chapter 1, and he asked, yes, I do ask for a template in each chapter because these organizations, they need the guidelines. There have been too many chapters and I might have forgotten. Well, the question is whether there's a template, a form. Okay, we can check it up and respond later. On item B, do you have a template, a form for the organization's reference? Thank you, Chairman. Well, regarding Mr. Leung's question, I'd like to point out that we do have one when an application is made for a lottery license. There is a guideline, and in Appendix 5 there is a template for income and expenditure, but I want to point out how it highlights the format of the income expenditure account. We also have a cash account, how we tell them how to do the cash accounting. We also have a format for the annual account, and in the guidelines we also have a FAQ. In the FAQ 1016 there is a detailed explanation of what information needs to be submitted, but we understand that in the PAC it's not clear enough, and we have already amended the guidelines and we've made up a new form, so that has already been implemented. I want to clarify one point in your requirements in Table 8. So if, let's say, they have 4 lotteries per year, so they have to submit these documents on each occasion. Yes, that is correct. I want to follow up on Table 8. In Item E, it says, if the net proceeds of the lottery are used for meeting the expenditure of the license, a copy of the audited annual financial statement, and it should show the income and expenditure of the lottery and the whereabouts of the net proceeds. So the lottery activity is to fund the expenses of the organization, partly or wholly. Well, I think that is not made clear. Could you explain the purpose and the scope of the statement? Well, the non-profit organization can sell lottery tickets to fund its own expenses. That is allowed. So this requires that the organization, the annual report of the whole organization, they need to indicate the income of the lottery and the expenses of the lottery, where the money was collected and where it was spent in our guidelines. We also have a template that in Appendix 7 there is an example. Let's say in their annual report how they should account for those monies. So in the audit report recommendation, see whether they can provide more clear guidelines for net income. We have amended our guidelines. We have added another template and indicating how they should indicate their net income. So we have already implemented the recommendation, the requirement, and we've added another template. So could you forward this template to our secretary? Yeah, we can do that subsequently. So we don't have this template on hand, so for Item E, the disclosure, you require the amounts listed for each lottery. So if they have 2 or 3 lottery activities per year, could they indicate the net proceeds? Well, we require them to do it for each occasion. So in Table 8, you have a lot of requirements, but if we look at the audit report, some bodies have not complied with these guidelines, and some of them are quite blatantly late. So in paragraph 4.8, the government has a mechanism to issue warning letters. So if you look at 4.8b, in some cases, you don't require a human operator to do it. It is just a computer warning letter that is issued after a certain date. So in case B, you say that warning letters were issued 125 days, 287 days, and 374 days after the due date. So is this system functioning well? If it is well, then why did scenario B occur? I'm sorry, our computer, I didn't hear you. It was during the era. Television Entertainment Licensing Authority. It has not been updated, so it's done manually. It's not a computer system. So on a due date, we have to identify it and then issue the letter. And the number of cases are limited. That is the number of licenses. We only have talking about a few dozen. Well, I'm a bit worried when I hear that. You're saying your computer system is old. Is that the whole HAD or just a portion? I want to ask that. It's for this licensing, that is the lottery system. It's not just for the lottery. We also have other tickets and lotteries. And one of the audit commission audit report recommendation is to upgrade our computer system. We're doing that. We are working with the Government Information Office to update our system. So for the lotteries and fundraising activities, you don't go to the district home affairs. Is it dealt centrally in one office? Yes, one licensing department. Well, I hope that you can examine your system as soon as possible. So if you have a computer system, it can be handled faster. And I know that it's not just to issue warning letters, but when you enhance the system, you can accelerate the work and you can save a lot of manpower. So I hope you can do that as soon as possible. Do you also have a timetable for upgrading the system? And do you have an expenditure forecast? Well, we're working with the Office of the Government Information Office. We're upgrading the whole system. So before we've upgraded the system, we've already done a streamlining of the process. We understand that in the number of cases, we can handle 80% of cases within 90 days, and but we need to step up our effort there. And we also want to prevent repeat applications being late. So in our application guideline, we've already included a table. The table lists the applicant, what they need to submit in a certain time frame, and we also ask if they've applied for any license in the past and the license number, have they submitted the full set of documents, and they also need to sign to verify. So adding that mechanism, we feel that we can remind the applicant what they need to do after they receive the license, and we also can prevent a non-submission of documents. We need them to declare whether they have done so, and if they have not complied, we can deny the license. So we want to have a deterrent effect and prevent a repeat occurrence. So that has already been implemented since our last meeting. We've updated the guidelines. Okay, one more question. Submission of documents and so are important. Another area of monitoring is the public's right to monitoring. In paragraph 4.1, it says that the public can go to your office. But just now, the director, you said that there's only one location. Where's that location? It's in Taikoo Place. So for the whole of Hong Kong, there's only Taikoo Place, and it says that Hong Kong public, if they want to scrutinize the funds of these lotteries, and they have to go to Taikoo Place to scrutinize the accounts, but they cannot photocopy this information. Well, so for the public, they wish to scrutinize accounts, they have to make an effort, and they have to go to Taikoo Place in person, but they're not allowed to make photocopies. Why are there so many restrictions? Why can't you make it easy for the public? Could you explain? Could you elaborate? Are you discouraging people from scrutinizing the accounts? We admit that this practice is not ideal, but it's because in the past nobody has scrutinized. Well, maybe it is a chicken and egg problem. But after our last meeting, we have made an improvement regarding the audit recommendations. We written to the dozens of organizations who made an application in 2016-17, and their accounts have been published on our Home Affairs website in PDF format. So even though it's not the most convenient method, but the public can download and photocopy this information we've implemented. So I can tell you today, for the accounts for the previous year, it has been published on the website. So in paragraph 4.15, it says that they accepted the Audit Commission's recommendations, and they're telling us that all the information from the last year has been published on their web. Just now the director said that you notified the organizations. Do you need their agreement to publish their accounts, or is it just a process? You have the right to do so, and if the legal requirement is that you need the organization's approval, well, then the organizations can disagree. Have you come across that? Well, according to our internal study, we feel that our licensing requirement has one clause that the civil servants can provide access to public scrutiny during a reasonable time and at a reasonable place. So we require them to put these accounts in our office, and by applying this clause, we believe we can do so on the web as well. But initially, the guidelines, it did not state clearly that it could be put on the web. So before we've done so, we had notified the applicants in the last year and those who had provided their fundraising accounts, so that we told them that we would do so, and we notified them. And we believe that under this licensing requirement, we can do so. So in our future guidelines, we've already stated clearly that we will put the accounts on the web in a PDF format. Chairman, I have no other questions regarding Part 4. Do colleagues have other questions? I'd like to ask the government on page 39, where they had a late submission. You have many cases. They are late. So they are late in different areas. Is it because you've given them too little time? So they are late in each step of the process? Chairman, we are referring to paragraph 4.6. Well, we understand. 90 days is not too short. If they only need to provide accounts for the lottery, it's not short. But we also examined our past cases, and the number of late cases, it involves small organizations. We won't name them. They might be schools, so they are selling lotteries, and the amount is also very small. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So after the event, the organizations, they don't understand that there's so much work involved, and then they have to find people to do the work, and the people are not familiar with the process, so they are late. So in the late cases, it's a smaller amount raised. Well, even though the amount raised might be large or small, the public has some expectations, and the government needs to regulate. So the different organizations, when they make an application, have you told them they need to do certain things by a certain date? And do you tell them that what the consequences are, or that they would receive a warning letter? We do have some guidelines. When the applicant makes an application, we do teach them, as I said just now, heightening their awareness, and we also need to educate them that there is an impact if they're late. So in the application, there is an item stating what they need to submit by a certain date, and they also need to tell us whether they have done so before, and the applicant needs to sign. So it's like a reminder. They need to understand that once the application is received, they have an obligation, and if they make future applications, there are consequences, because we will not issue a license if they don't comply. How many staff do you have working on this? Just one person, an EO? Because the licensing unit is not just working on lottery licenses. We have different licenses under the gambling license, gambling ordinance. So we have one staff and another clerk working on lottery licenses for. Are you understaffed? So given the limited resources, we will do our job. So regarding the audit commission's report, we will make improvements. There are about 66 of these lottery licenses granted every year. So one person, is that not enough? It is a bit tight, especially we need to issue warning letters by hand. It is tight, and after enhancing our system, and we want to do a better job. So I would also want to explain that a lot of times the focus is on scrutinizing the application, because the application, aside from lottery licenses, we will also scrutinize applications for fundraising for the operating expenses of the organization. So we have to look at the past 3-year accounts. So we have to see whether they are really for non-profit before we allow them a lottery license. So in the first stage, we will have a more focus on that.
Well, I'd like to inform the director, because I'm a district councillor. I have quite a lot of contacts with the Home Affairs Department. Now, I want to ask whether your time frame is too tight and therefore people are late. Now, if it is not, then people don't find the requirement very important. So you rely on your staff members to go after them. You need to remind them that late submission is not in line with public interest. Now you just have one EO and one clerk to do it. You have a manpower problem. You know, they have a lot of work to do. This is not the first time I've told you. If you have any manpower shortage, you better apply for more hands. Delay is not desirable. In particular, this is about money. People are concerned where have the donations go? Where have the donations gone? They keep asking us. And if we make donations, can we really help those who are in need? People are concerned about it. Now, concerning cash donations, now they raise funds, they go back and count the sums. Is there any surprise check on these organizations to check on the accounting of the money? Well, we do not conduct surprise checks after the organizations have sold the lotteries. But if they are to receive cash donations, they have to make arrangements with witnesses, and the witnesses and those who do the counting will have to sign, and then they have to sign a report and send the report to us. So there are guidelines for the steps to be taken. Now they sell lotteries in different places. They may do the counting at different times, at different places. And if they don't inform us, and if they inform us, then it's not a surprise check. Well, the average is about $86 million. They are checking according to C of Table 8. Now, if there are people doing witnessing of opening the boxes and doing the counting, how many volunteers are required? And have you checked on those cases or volunteers? We require 2 signatures. The one who counts and the witness, and also a witness or a volunteer. But we do not check the identity of the volunteer. The supervision is in terms of the report. Now they count the money, they put it into the account. There is the income and expenditure statement, and we check the fund flow or the cash flow, and we check whether this is in line with the arrangements. Say whether it is a fundraising for a Section 88 organization. If it is for the operation expenses of the non-profit organization, that has to be reflected in the financial accounts, and we check by this way. Have you come across any case in which you check the report and somebody sign the report? Do you check on the signature whether they're authentic? Well, we don't have the power, but if we have any doubts, then we can refer the case to the relevant law enforcement authorities. So, for example, they referred a case to the police, but there is no evidence. Chairman, check and balance is important. Well, of course, I trust the charitable organizations, but there is a need to enhance confidence in charity organizations. If there are preventive measures that will enhance confidence in such organizations, say starting from counting to putting the money into the bank, there can be checks. and the banks are also playing a role. I think the biggest problem is when the donation box is opened. Say, for example, somebody buy the lottery tickets with a face value of $20, but they put in $100. We trust the people, but not 100% of the people are trustworthy, and that's why people go to jail. Now you adopt you trust them. They put in the signatures, but how can we ensure that there are really two people doing their job instead of one? You don't need to check on each and every case. I know that you are short of hands, but you can conduct some kind of sampling checks, and then the officer in charge will pay more attention to their operation. But that's a good suggestion, isn't it? Well, it's not a small sum. About $80-odd million are involved. Do other members have any question? If not, then I want to draw your attention to paragraph 4 to 11. Mr. Leung has asked this. There are 6 cases under 4.11. In their financial accounts, they did not show separately the income and expenditure of their lottery events, nor the use of net proceeds, and you accepted their explanation. Do you set out the criteria for accepting and not accepting the explanation? Under what circumstances will you accept? Do you accept, under what you don't? Now you ask them to comply, but they don't. And then they explain to you, and you accept the explanation. Are there criteria for accepting the explanation or not? If there is none, then it's meaningless to put the requirement in 8E. With regard to the cases, we inquired about the details. We asked the officer in charge about the income and expenditure and also the use of net proceeds. Now, usually they apply for lottery for the purpose of operational expenses. If the net income is not, or net proceeds are not spent in this area, that will be in breach of the licensing conditions, since the purpose of the license is for that. Now they have given us a very clear explanation. Now we set out in the guidelines requiring the applicants to set out the use of net proceeds. Up till now, we have not seen any need to refer any case to the authorities concerned. Now with the enhancement of the guideline and also the provision of examples, they are able to know the use of to specify the use of net proceeds. Now, if they breach the licensing conditions, you should look at it from a law enforcement perspective. They have the responsibility to provide the details. Now, you are given discretion, but there should be guidelines for exercising the discretion. Are there other questions? Yes, Kenneth. You may now move on to another part of the report. Chairman, thank you. Members may ask supplementary questions on paragraph 4 later. I will move on to paragraph 5 concerning the temporary hawker licenses for fundraising activities involving on-street selling. My first question is in respect of paragraph 5.2. there is a condition. The license can be issued to a non-profit making organization which is under Section 88. Another kind is other non-profit making organizations under, say, for example, the Companies Ordinance or other regimes. Now, these non-profit organizations, concerning these non-profit making organizations, how do you know they are? I want to ask the FEHD. How do you distinguish the applicant is a non-profit making organization? Director of FEH. Now, in vetting such an application, in deciding whether an organization is non-profit making or not, we ask for their documents, say their constitutions. It can be under the Companies Ordinance, it can be under the Societies Ordinance, it can be a labor organization. We look at the objects. Under the Companies Ordinance, the Memorandum Articles of Association, if it states that it is a non-profit organization, then it is. Now, do you have any information on your website in respect of this? Now, I have read it and I don't know. So for the less experienced organizations, do you provide any information on your website? Do you give them any guidance as to that? Say in the chairman, in the application guideline, when they lodge their application documents, we stated very clearly in the application form that we ask for the article of association. And whether the organizations are clear about it or not, well, the license have been there for quite some time. And usually the applicants are regular applicants. If there are new organizations who don't know, then we are happy to explain the rules to them. Chairman, if I may draw members' attention to Table 9, page 58 of the English version. Table 9 lists the total number of temporary hawker licenses in the past 5 years. In 2012, 267. And last year, 16-17, just 48. I just want to confirm that this is the number of hawker licenses, not the number of organizations. My understanding is that an organization can apply for many licenses per year. Is my understanding correct? Yes, this is the number of licenses. An organization which fulfills our conditions can obtain more than one license. So, and if they obtain 2 licenses in a year, then there will be 2 licenses in the count. I have not seen the format of your license. Now, your license has a time limit. You can only do certain things at a certain place during a certain period of time. Are there specifications in terms of the hours of the day in conducting the hawking activity? And do you restrict the time and place for conducting hawking activities? Well, the license has several characteristics. Now, this is for charitable fundraising. Now, we issue hawker licenses to regulate hawkers, and there must be the change of hands of goods. And if there is no change of hands, if there is no change of goods, then is another kind of charitable activity. Now, according to the hawker regulation, the license will have a tenure of no more than 1 month. And as for selling, on-street selling for fundraising purposes, we have tightened the rules. We restrict it to no more than 5 days in 2 weeks in a row. Now, maybe during weekends, there are more people in the streets. Now, when we're issuing licenses, we consider and after obtaining a license, the applicant will make full use of the time. They may use 5 days. They may choose the 5 days in 2 weeks. Now, the license is for a short period of time. Say, for example, in June, in July, specific days. The organization may do the on-street selling for just a few hours. Will the place be specified as well? Yes, it will. This is based on our original hawker policy. If there is any on-street selling, the place is also specified in the license. Generally speaking, how long does it take to get the license approved? Well, according to our procedure, application has to be made at least 14 days before the activity. So we expect that we can complete the approval process within 14 days. Now, you say some licenses only having a tenure of just a few hours. Now, in June, in July, maybe it's June 4th or another mass event in the streets in July, in early July. Now, when they apply, do they say, I just want a license for a few hours or I want a license for 2 weeks? It's for you to decide on the periods or for they to specify the need. Well, we ask for the applicant has to specify the date and time. Now, on table, with regard to table 9, on page 58 of the English version, the number of licenses is going down a bit over the past 2 years. Do you have a dedicated team doing licensing? How many people are there in the team? Chairman, before and after 2012. Now, in 2011, you have more than 1,000 licenses, and after that, you have only 200 or less. Why is it so? If you look at Table 9, Chairman, for tax-exempted charities, they were able to obtain more temporary hawker licenses. In the notes, we explained that in the year 2011, there were more temporary hawker licenses, 1,200. 90% were issued to tax-exempt charities. At that time, there was a public opinion which was that the organizations might abuse the license. Therefore, we introduced new measures in 2012. We require the organizations, or we will set a limit on the number of licenses in 12 months. And our rule was that no more than 20 such licenses for the organization in a year. If the number is more than 12, for the 13th application, we ask for the financial accounts.
After implementation of this measure, well, when it was introduced, the intent was that public resources would be put to the best use, and to a certain extent, this will avoid abuse. And since we asked for financial statements, after certain licenses have been issued, we hope that will enhance transparency and accountability. We believe that these measures would reasonably strike a balance between charitable fundraising activities by charitable organizations and society's concern towards such fundraising activities. After the measure was implemented, were there organizations which were applying for more than 12 licenses within 12 months? Well, there was just one. And that organization did this in 2013. And after that, until now, our record shows that there are no other organizations that have applied for more than 12 temporary hawker licenses within 12 months. Kenneth. Chairman, the director is saying that they need to submit financial statements starting from the 13th application. But this is not to enhance internal control or accountability. It's just that you don't want people to get too many licenses. Because if you want to look at the financial statements, you should ask for those for all the activities. So it seems your approach and your objective are not totally related, because people now don't come forward to apply for a 13th license because they don't want to have their accounts audited. So, Director, are you encouraging people to do it, or since you only ask for financial statements starting from the 13th, why is that so? What's the rationale? The member is saying that charitable organizations are now made to apply for only 12 licenses per year. So what is actually your policy intent? Is it just not to give them too many licenses? Why don't you just say everybody can only apply for 12 within a year, instead of saying, I need to look at your account starting from the 13th? I don't see any logic or rationale behind your approach. Chairman, when this type of organizations applies for a temporary hawker licenses to sell physical articles to raise funds in the streets, very often the scale of the activity will not be large. In July 2012, we started this measure and we were trying to strike a balance. If we require the organizations to submit a financial or audited financial statement for every activity, it may be too burdensome and it may not be proportionate to the activity. As I said, this license only regulates very short-term fundraising activities. It must be at a fixed spot. Physical articles must be sold. If every time we ask the relevant organization to submit a financial statement, our view then was that to a certain extent, this may keep the organizations away. We drew a line at 12 licenses. I believe it is a reasonable balance. Kenneth, just now they were talking about 5.5C. May I go to 5.7B? You say that you introduced the new measure in 2012 and only one organization has been issued with more than 12 temporary hawker licenses within 12 months and so on and so forth. Of course, this organization has to show you their account starting from the 13th. Director, do you remember what the income was like for the 13th or 14th application? Can you give us an idea? Director, I don't have the figures at hand. I can supplement them after the meeting. Or like the HAD, they could say there were an average 66 licenses totaling about $86 million. Do you have such figures for our reference? Every year, you have issued 200 licenses or fewer. I'd like to know how much money has been raised. So if we see that the money is not that much, then perhaps you don't need to increase your control. But when we don't see the figures, we cannot make our judgment. Do many people donate to these activities? Chairman, all along, we do not require financial information from the organizations unless they apply for more than 12 licenses within a year. You asked us for data about different types of organizations and how much money they raise through this type of license. Well, I don't have it at hand. But if you look at it from the charitable point of view, we can see that if somebody buys something to donate money to a licensee, very often it's sundry items, stationery, books, or clothing. They buy the article and then they donate the money. And the donation is not tax exempt because there is the exchange for a physical object or an article. So it is not like just donating money. This is not tax exempt. And as for the organization, unless it is a tax exempt organization, the average non-profit making organization does not necessarily enjoy tax exemption when they sell articles in the streets for fundraising. In fact, very often they have to pay tax. We like to protect the donors. They may want to know the accounts, they may want to know where the money has gone. Under our license, if I may refer you to Table 9, from 2014-15 onwards, the number of licenses issued, 60% of them have to do with non-profit making organizations. But they do not raise funds for charitable services, and they may not enjoy tax exemption. Therefore, temporary hawker licenses issued by us for regulating on-street fundraising activities is basically the same as the fundraising for charitable purposes. Kenneth, may I please follow? Because in 515C, you say you may consider how to improve the situation. Director, what is your final view? What have you decided to do? Can you tell us now? 5.15C. Chairman, in the papers submitted to the meeting today, I have pointed out that we'd like to strike a balance. On the one hand, members of the public are concerned about fundraising activities, and at the same time, we in fact regulate this type of activities, and which is not the same as the average fundraising activity. We are imposing a new condition in the license so that the licensee will have to display the purpose of the fundraising activity and the name of their organization at a conspicuous place at the stall or booth. We believe that can be done. And also, under best practices, the custody of monies received at the booth should be kept in a secure way, and we will remind them through administrative measure. Later on in the year, we may impose this as a licensing condition or as an administrative measure. You mean by December 2017? Well, members, we have received a paper which is Gen 8. We received that 2 days ago. Is it Gen 8? Yes, that's right. Kenneth. I'd like to make a personal proposal with regard to the application for more than 12 licenses within a year. As you said, Director, every time the license doesn't cover an activity which involves a big amount. Now you ask them for an audited account at the 13th application. Well, if that's the case, why don't you ask them for a consolidated report for activity 1 to activity 13, because the cumulative figure may be a big one. If you only ask them for the 13th application, it may not be very meaningful. Do you think what I propose can be done? Director, is a proposal. Let us consider it. The principle is to facilitate the selling of articles on the street to raise funds, but the public have some concern towards such fundraising activities, and therefore when we consider different measures, we'll try to strike a balance between these two different views. Okay, let me go to 5.11 about inspections. Your colleagues do inspect licensed premises. Under A, you say 1,251 inspections were conducted. Records revealed that no approved on-street selling activities had been carried out, and which was similar to the results of the random on-site inspections on PSP fundraising activities conducted by the SWD. I'd like to ask a question here. What do you mean? Why do you want to compare with the PSP fundraising activities? Chairman, may I ask the audit why they want to make this comparison? What are they trying to say? Director of Audit, 511A. Chairman, can I defer to the Assistant Director? Yes. Thank you, Chair. Two departments inspect on-street selling activities to see whether licensing conditions have been complied with. We draw a comparison here because we have looked at the records and they show that the licensees sometimes do not conduct the activities as approved, and we are concerned whether social resources have been put to the best use. We draw a comparison here to show that a certain number of licensees do not make use of the time and venues to conduct charitable activities. Since two departments conduct similar inspections, we want to make this point, and that is whether the department's attention should be drawn to this, because this may be a problem. And two, since the activities are similar, especially if the activities are exempted, and I'm talking about the same activity which receives exemption from both departments, then perhaps the departments can exchange information so they have a clearer view. Since different departments are working on the same case, then perhaps there may be a synergy effect if they can exchange information, and they may have a more comprehensive view. That is why we make this statement. I'd like to clarify something, Chairman. Can the Director further clarify? Every year, there are exempt cases. If you apply for a license from the SWD, then there can be exemption. But are the inspections done based on the licenses issued by the FEHD only, or do you also inspect the exempted cases? What is your sample size? Do you only inspect cases where the FEHD issues the temporary hawker licenses? Who will take the question? Can I ask the JD? Because in Gen 10, sorry, the SWD, because under Gen 10, you have made a suggestion with regard to such no-show cases. What do you propose to do in the short term? And then how do you liaise with the other departments so as to improve the situation? In Gen 10, I think you have touched upon this. Yes, Chairman. We have talked about the inspections conducted by the SWD. We now conduct random inspections. We'd like to see how the applied for charitable events have been conducted. We have always been reminding the organizations that when they make their plans, they have to deploy manpower in a way so as not to waste resources. In Gen 10, we have explained that there may be different reasons for no-show. Sometimes it's because of unanticipated inclement weather, or they have unforeseeable manpower shortage. Say they have been hoping to recruit volunteers, but they failed to do so. And number 3, we may go at a certain time and the fundraising activity has ended, or the activity starts only after the departure of our staff. And the situation may vary. The audit has proposed that we do 2 things. One, in May, when we issue the PSP, we'll remind the organizations again that they have to make a very careful planning and arrange manpower in a suitable way and use the government land venue granted for the approved fundraising activities effectively. Secondly, we'll strengthen liaison with FEHD and the Lands Department on the feasibility of sharing enforcement information, so we can share information to tackle the issue. Thank you. Later on, if you have information, please let us have a copy. Kenneth. I like the FEHD to talk about the no-show cases. How do you follow up and how do you handle them? DFEH Chairman. Whether the organizer has applied for our license or whether it has got a PSP from the SWD, so it is exempt, our colleagues will still inspect the venues at the time proposed by the organizer. If it is a hawker license, our colleagues will in fact inspect the venues because there are people patrolling the streets. From a regulatory point of view, if there is no show, because when they get a license, the purpose is not to cause environment hygiene, obstruction, or nuisance problems. Now, if they do not show up, well, there is not a big problem for us because we are trying to regulate hawker activities. But I agree that if they have applied for a license to conduct an activity but there is no show, then the road resources may not be put to the best use because they have already signed up for that road space at that time.
So if we discover there's a no-show, then we should submit the information to SWD. So when they vet another application for fundraising, they can use that as a reference. So we will strengthen liaison with the departments. One more question, Chairman. In paragraph 5.12, fundraising activities involving on-street selling and a lack of one-stop service, I'd like FEHD and SWD to elaborate what are they doing to make it convenient for organizations to apply for a license. Are they providing a one-stop service, or do they have a one-stop service? Do they have a plan, and when will it be implemented? Chairman, applying for a temporary hawker license, we have different types of applications. Some tax-exempt charitable organizations, and whether they have made a PSP application, that's not necessarily the case. So we do not have a uniform method to deal with it. The principle should be, we want to make it simple and convenient for the applicant. The second principle is, if resources are involved, we want to utilize these resources efficiently. So we work with SWD or Lands Department, and there is room for better cooperation. So Chairman, if you could allow us to follow up on the audit report and take on board members' views. Okay, thank you. If you could provide some information, that would be good. Mr. Lam Chok Teng. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on there were some no-shows, and I'd like to follow up on that. I'd like to declare interest first. Democratic Party. We also have lotteries and other on-street fundraising and other fundraising activities. So we do have some experience. I used to be working for the Democratic Party, so I'm familiar with operations. I'd like to talk about the PSP, the public subscription permit, and not appearing at a no-show. My understanding is that different bodies, they do have these problems. There could be weather problems, staff problems. So if you ask them to raise money on the streets, it's because they don't have major donations. That's why they have to raise funds on the street. These are not organized, or they are not fully staffed. Usually that's not the case. So a lot of times they have to rely on volunteers, and then if you factor in weather or the environment, there might be people doing other stuff. There might be beggars. There might be bands. There are a lot of street performances now, and they choose popular locations. So it's not easy to have a high attendance rate. So some recommendation. So could you apply a bit more empathy when dealing with these cases? If you give them 100 permits and 99 times there's a no-show, of course that needs a review next year. But if overall they try their best, and if they don't, if they have a no-show, they have a reasonable excuse. So I'd like you to extend some sympathy, and because these are disadvantaged groups we're talking about. I want to follow up on the audit report, page 45, paragraph 5.5, note 33. Let me quote so the TV audience can understand what we're talking about. It says, in February 2012, a media report revealed that a tax-exempt charity had been issued with more than 120 temporary hawker licenses in a year for conducting on-street selling activities, and monies received were not put into any donation boxes. That's note 33. Also, the organization was not required to submit any financial statements for the fundraising activities involving on-street selling to the FEHD. So what does Note 33 say? It says that the media reported that a tax-exempt charity had been issued with more than 120 temporary hawker licenses in a year for conducting on-street selling activities, and the monies received were not put into any donation boxes. Also, the organization was not required to submit any financial statements for the fundraising activities involving on-street selling to the FEHE. That's the end of quote. So I want to ask, Note 33, this case, the government departments, did they follow up on this case? FEHD? I don't have that information, Chairman. You can go back and check and respond later. They don't have it on hand. I'm just thinking how I should follow up. I'll try to ask, and the director, you could respond policy-wise, and you can respond with the facts later. Well, I think this case is not ideal because they have 120 temporary licenses a year, so it's a license for every three days. So I think you'll see them in all the popular spots in Hong Kong. In terms of rent that could be charged, this is a big incentive. A lot of public resources have been used to subsidize this tax-exempt charitable organization. And this organization, the most shocking fact is that the monies were not put into any donation boxes. That is hard to comprehend. They are doing charity work, so it's hard to imagine if they don't have a collection box. And so I'm assuming they are selling merchandise because they have a hawker license. So what happened? So do they have a fanny pack where they collect funds, or? And second, as Mr. Siugafai said, and I also have first-hand experience with the Democratic Party, if the public align with your charity or politics, they just drop money in the box. They don't even want change. If you say that you're selling merchandise, they give you $100, $20, $200, and they don't expect change. And if you don't have a donation box, how do they just pocket the money? I'll stop here first. Director? Well, Mr. Lam has two questions. The first, 120 licenses per year. So on average, every 3 days, they have a license for a fundraising activity every 3 days. So in our measures we implemented in the past, regarding the issuing of temporary licenses, we do not have any limit. But after this incident, starting from 2012, we set a cap. I mentioned it briefly. Anybody within 12 months, the temporary licenses we issue will not exceed 20. So, to a certain extent, we're trying to strike a balance. Cap at 20, and second, how should the monies be handled? I said that in general, the on-street selling, there's actual merchandise transaction, the legislator mentioned that some people don't expect change. They pay more than the label price of the merchandise. So it's hard to regulate. If they're selling a book, let's say $48, some people will expect change. So unless you request the buyer to put $48 in the collection box, but if you have to provide change, there are some difficulties. But anyway, regarding the audit report, we accept the Commissioner's recommendations on security. We can strengthen some measures. So as I said just now, within this year, in our licensing requirements, we will regulate the license applicant. They have to have secure measures to store the monies. We will follow up on that. Well, thank goodness I have actual experience. You can provide change. The Democratic Party, when we sell raffle tickets, some people drop the money in a box. Some people might have a $500 bill and they want to buy $100 or $80 of lottery tickets. We already have stacks. We have staff with small change. They can provide change and they can drop the money in the box. So if you ask people to make donations, you need to you have to prepare in advance. It's like a taxi cab driver. They have to provide change. That can be done. It doesn't affect the accounting. That can be done. Do you agree? Chairman, I said just now, we accept the Audit Commission's recommendations, and within this year we will implement some measures. We heard the view. When we implement this guideline, the license holder will understand that there are concerns and we need to comply with the license requirements. That's very good, Director. Because, Chairman, the fundraising on streets is very varied. We have people in wheelchairs. They are real cases, but we also heard of fraud. People get up of the wheelchair after fund collecting. There have been such reports. And people also use dogs and cats as fundraising objects, and a lot of this fundraising, street fundraising, they have letterheads from SWD or FEHD, but 99% of the public won't scrutinize that. I wouldn't. I'm so busy. They have a name of an organization that you've never heard of. So perhaps a director needs to think about it. Will you create a logo? It could be issued by SWD, FEHD, or whatever. They are eligible to raise funds. And you can make it illegal to raise funds outside of a certain location and time if they don't. So the public needs to know whether it is a government-approved activity. Well, of course, you can make counterfeit. Then, yeah, if there are counterfeits, they can be prosecuted. That would be easier for the public. You can't ask them for a letter or a license. Well, the police stop people whenever I go to the lotteries, fundraising people to complain. They say there's noise and that we're obstructing the streets. So if you can display their sign, then there can be some mutual trust. So is that feasible? Well, Mr. Lam and other legislators have provided a lot of input. After we compile these views, we can make reference and discuss this. If some people display a fake license, they can be prosecuted, and in the future, if they seek applications, they might be blacklisted. So their applications could be made difficult. It would help the public differentiate. Otherwise, we have so many departments now responsible for this. Another question. We're talking about temporary hawker licenses. Could we also sidetrack? Oh, in the past we've seen natural disasters, and the public are very generous. They ask, can we donate money? And of course it's convenient now. They can go to the banks, they can make internet transactions. There are different channels for aid relief and disaster relief organizations. But some people, they might see a booth on the street, and we have to decline that because we cannot receive donations on behalf of other organizations. So I'd like to ask, does the government have any policy for humane aid? Is there any emergency mechanism to deal with these fundraising applications? How much time does it take? SWD? Let me attempt to respond. If they comply with the requirements under Cap 200, these charitable activities, if there are emergency applications in the past, we can issue a permit by the second day, because we understand some charity events are for emergency relief, and we can have a special deal with it. We can give it a priority. Well, does it have to be a charity organization that makes the application? Chairman, in our permit in Gen 10, we've issued to the PAC. We require that this organization, they have to be under the company's ordinance or the society ordinance. They have to be registered under such. And this organization, they need to tell us that can any organization make an application. We do have some requirements. They have to submit at least the charitable accounts for the past 3 years. So these are our safeguards for charitable organization applications. I understand. So political parties are registered under the company ordinance, and let's say we want to provide disaster relief for Sichuan. We've done that previously, but I'm not sure what the latest policy is.
Say if we want to do it, but ours is not a charitable organization, then what can we do? Chairman, I think there are two parts here. If a political party wants to raise funds for the political party, that's not for charitable purposes. I'm talking about humanitarian relief. If it is for humanitarian relief, then we consider the nature of the applicant. the applicant has to be registered under the various ordinances. And then we also look at the beneficiaries. Or rather, the receiving organization, it is a non-profit organization. Say if the applicant is not a Section 88 organization or a charitable organization, then we'll look at the organization receiving the donation, whether it is a charitable organization or not. Chairman, that means the money or the political party can raise funds for a charitable organization to do relief work. That is allowed in principle, right? You've obtained free advice. Thank you. Yes, Tanya Chan. I want to ask questions on the way forward. There's a bit of distribution of labor. Shall we have a break now? Yeah. I want to have a break at 11 because they won. They have to cast the votes. Another panel. In fact, Bills Committee. Well, I leave it to other members then. And they only have the meeting at starting from 11:15. All right. Yes, we'll have to fill in the gap. I just want to ask whether other members have any further questions on Chapter 5. Yes, Mr. Shield has. Yes, Chairman, I want to ask the FEHD concerning these organizations. After they have raised funds, will they report to you the amounts they have raised? Yes or no? Chairman, I've already explained. Under our licensing conditions, we do not require the licensee to give us their accounts or give us their financial reports after the activity. But if they if the same organization apply for more than 12 temporary org license, then the financial reports are required for the 13th license. This is a special arrangement. Now, there is a change of hands in terms of goods. Straightly speaking, the donor is not tax exempted, and the recipient, depending on the situation, if it is not a Section 88 organization, the non-profit organizations can still apply for a license, and the non-profit making organization is not given tax exemption status. So in applying certain measures, the arrangement will not be so tight as the as those under Section 88. Now, if they apply for fundraising and if they are approved, then they don't need to report to you their financial accounts. But they will have to do that within the financial reports of the company itself. Now, we do give exemption. Say if the selling on street has obtained a PSP from the SWD, the SWD's PSP has certain terms in terms of financial reporting, and there will not be any repetition. So it falls on the lap of the SWD. So my question for the SWD, do they have reports submitted to you, SWD? Chairman, I want to clarify the point. Not all such selling activities have SWD permits. Only those activities under Cap 200, say the sale of souvenir or badges, then, excuse me, take your time, take a sip of water. They have to get our permit only under the law, under that specific provision. And if they have to get the PSP, then they have to comply with the conditions and give us their audited report of the activity. and that report has to be submitted after 90 days, 90 days after the completion of the activity. If it is approved by the FEHD but not under the SWD, then who is to supervise those organizations? FEHD, as said by the Commissioner, or rather Director of Social Welfare. Now, if they've got the PSP and then apply for temporary hawker license to facilitate the organizer, we do not repeat the process. We just give exemption. As said by Mr. Chiu, those organizations who've got a temporary hawker license are not tax-exempted non-profit making organizations. If they are not tax-exempted, they cannot get a permit from the SWD. They are non-profit making organizations. They may be registered under the Companies Ordinance, Social Welfare, Societies Ordinance, or labor organizations. When they apply, we will make sure that they are non-profit making. If they conduct profit-making activities, we do not issue hawker license to them, according to present-day policy. In the mid-1970s, since the mid-1970s, the Urban Council hadn't issued any hawker licenses. Issuing hawker licenses is just in response to charitable fundraising by way of on-street selling. And concerning these fundraising activities, our system does not require any financial accounts. The scale is of such activities is rather small, and the license has specific conditions in terms of time and place of the activity. And sometimes the activity is completed within a day or within a few days. This is to find a suitable balance. If they obtain licenses if they obtain for no more than 12 licenses within a year, then they don't need to give us any financial reports. But if they have the 13th or more license, then they will have to submit the financial accounts. This is to find a suitable balance between facilitating fundraising activities by charitable fundraising activities by certain organizations and adequate supervision of fundraising. Now, if they are not under the SWD, then where, to whom are they to report their accounts? There is none. There is none. You look at Table 9. There are two types, Section 88 and non-profit making organizations. From July 2012, the number of licenses declined from 102,000 to less than 200. Within 12 months, they could at most get 12 licenses, and starting from 13, they will have to submit a financial report, and they dare not do so. Therefore, because of that, for the requirement. So, if it is under 12 reports, then to whom should they report? They've already explained that. Mr. Leung has already asked that. Such activities of small scale, there is no supervision on the amount received. When we ask the HAD, we remind them that such activities obtain more than $86 million. But the fundraising of the activity is small, and also there is no supervision. And I think they are trying to improve that under 5.15c. It seems, Chairman, I ask the question again because there is public expectation. They hope that all the fundraising is genuine. And how do people know the accounts? It seems that if they have less than 13 licenses, and if they there is no supervision at all. Yes, under 5.12c. Well, concerning non-profit making organizations raising fund by on-street selling, I've already explained that the donor does not get any tax exemption because he has bought a piece of goods. As for the fundraiser, if there is any exchange of goods, the donor does not get any tax exemption, but the recipient is not a tax-exempted non-profit organization. Unless there is any special reason, the income from on-street selling will not be tax exempted. You may be concerned. Now, you want to protect the donor. The donor fully knows that when he makes such a donation, there is no tax exemption. And as for the recipient, if it is a non-profit making organization, there is no automatic tax exemption. So when you look at it, I hope you can understand this point. The tax arrangement for this non-profit making organization is different from tax-exempted organizations. My concern is not tax exemption. The non-profit charitable organizations sell goods, and there is value to the goods. And also we've come across cases in which the directors have remunerations. That is people's concern. Now, according to the IRO, they have to report their incomes to the IRO. And how do they deal with their incomes? There must be some supervision. Otherwise, there is none. The director, in replying to the commissioner of audit, or rather, director of audit, if we require the non-profit making organizations which are not tax exempted have to submit financial accounts for the fund so raised, there must be a consensus. It seems that we have yet to come to this stage. Many organizations are raising funds on street or by on-street selling for non-charitable objects or purposes. They will be affected. So we need to come to a consensus. We need to consult them as well. But you do give the undertaking under 5.15c to enhance transparency.
完全咩都唔做，你係承諾咗會做。
Now you have given the undertaking.
冇問題啦，Tanya，係咪你有？主席剩翻5分。
All right, Tanya. Well, there is 5 minutes left. There are 5 minutes left. All right, have a break for 15 minutes then.
嚇？係隔離房。另外一個 Billscom 嚟嘅。
我都有兩個 Billscom 喎，點邊個咧？
唔係 Apology， 另外一個Pro 再循環嗰個 EA 對唔住啊。